Anyone ever found a body? What's that like? I worked at a retirement home for about a year, more specific at the dementia part of the house, and we had one man who every day was worried sick for his wife, who has been dead for 8 years. On his birthday, both of his daughters showed up and talked and showed lots of pictures. He didn't remember his daughters, but he recognized his wife. Tears of joy, he watched pictures and told stories. The morning after, when I went to wake him up, he was dead. He had a big smile on his face, and it was somehow very, very beautiful. Found my dad dead from a heart attack one morning as a 7-year-old. Then, when I was 8, I found my grandfather dead. He fell, hit his head into a tub full of water one morning. I have posted this before, but in the 1980s, I found a human skeleton while doing land surveying work. The property was about 40 acres in size and wooded. I had gone down a property line to cut a tree limb that was blocking our line of sight. I noticed some bones scattered around. That didn't mean much at first, because animals die in the woods all the time. You see bones. But then I saw the skull and my heart jumped up in my throat. I went back to my truck and radioed it in. I was in the land before cell phones. The sheriff's department came out and started an investigation, but they told me they were fairly sure who it was. We were in a smaller town and there was only one missing person. An elderly man with dementia had vanished about 18 months before. That's who it turned out to be. I was interviewed by our local and regional newspapers, got my picture in the paper. That was a bit uncomfortable as it made me slightly known for a while, but people soon forgot about it. At least the man's family got some closure. I used to work at this sports bar, so it wasn't uncommon for people to leave their car in parking lot for a day or two. After having a couple days off, I come into work and this car that was there a day before my weekend started is still parked in the same spot. I tell my boss about it and go check it out. As I get close to the car, the smell hits me like a truck. Some guy committed suicide in his car during a heat wave in the middle of summer. I call the cops and tell my boss. When the police arrived, I was asked to make a statement. While I was doing this, the paramedics showed up to remove the body. They got this bloated, rotten corpse halfway out of the vehicle when it just fell apart, splattering on the pavement. I'll never forget that smell. One night, I was out walking my dog along a country road where a ditch accompanied the road either side. As I was walking, my dog started going mad trying to tug away from its lead to this ditch, so I wanted to see what it was. It ended up being a corpse, so I called the cops. They found out that a gang murder happened in a city about 40 miles away, and one of the members thought a small village would be a great place to put it. My granddad was a few months shy of 90 and still lived by himself. He was pretty spry. My mom called him every morning. One day he didn't answer, so she called me to go over and check on him. They lived about 40 minutes away and I lived about 5 minutes away. I let myself in and found him in his easy chair holding his phone. He was cold. My dad showed up in about 20 minutes and we both cried. I called the police and they came in, checked it out, and did us a favor of calling the funeral home we asked. My dad said he was talking with him about 9 p.m. the night before and said he was sounding groggy, so he said goodnight, and Granddad must have rested and passed. He was a great guy. I found my dad's body after he killed himself last year. He was lying face down on his bed, so the blood had pooled down to his stomach and face, making him almost unrecognizable. His face was smooshed in, and his body was mottled blue, as he had killed himself during the night. It was an overdose. He mixed bottles of pills, oxycodone, Flexeril, Ativan, amitriptyline, and more, with alcohol and stopped breathing. I'll never forget time slowing down and feeling as if I wasn't there. I have severe anxiety and have dissociated before, but the dissociation that hits you when you experience trauma like this is truly something else. I knew he was dead, but my mind wasn't letting me acknowledge it. I was apparently screaming and I don't remember doing so. I tried to wake him up. I called to him and touched his shoulders and accidentally stepped in the puddle where he had peed himself, feeling how stiff and cold his body was jarring. I was still in shock, but I remember it finally semi-clicking in my brain that he was dead the moment I touched him. I called emergency services but don't remember the process of doing so. My dad had been suicidal for years, and I was used to taking care of him during his drug and alcohol binges. As such, I had been mentally preparing myself for this moment for years. He had tried to mutilate and shoot himself a year before, and had cleaned his blood then. I had even worked crime and trauma scene cleanup for a few years. I've seen terrible things. I've cleaned blood, brain matter, bone, and more. But finding my own dad dead shocked me so much that I finally blacked out as he was wheeled away. I ended up having to clean everything up again, even after I had made my dad promise me he'd never do this to me again. Nothing will ever completely prepare you for losing a loved one or finding a body. No matter how much you may think you're desensitized or used to it, or think you may be okay, in the end, nobody knows how they will react. To this day, my family's screams of anguish are what I remember the most from that day. The absolute worst part is the guilt and shame that rocks through you. You wonder if there was something you could have done to save them. You wonder if they'd still be alive if only you had done X or Y. Over a year later, and I'm still suffering these thoughts. I would never wish this on anyone. Back in the mid-80s, fresh out of college, got a job on a survey crew for the summer working on a section of highway just off of Interstate 80 in Wyoming. We always came across dead animals that had been hit by cars. But one day we had pulled off in a secured spot to eat lunch when we saw something out in the field, literally 40 miles from the nearest town, flopping around. We just passed it off as some deer that had been hit by a car and had crawled into the field to die. We went on and ate our lunch. Before we went back to work, our survey crew leader said, "Let's go take a look at what that is." The closer we got, we all knew it was a human being. She was still alive. Barely, but still alive. We radioed in what we discovered, and within about 30 minutes an air ambulance was on the scene. Before the ambulance got there, we gave her water but didn't move her. She couldn't speak, but we could tell she was thankful we were there and found her. They flew her down to Colorado, where she made a full recovery. Turned out she was traveling cross-country with her boyfriend when they got into an argument, and he decided to off her and dump her body. Thing was, she wasn't dead when he dumped her body where we found her. He had beat her and strangled her with a rope, and when she passed out, he thought she was dead and dumped her. Never heard any more, but only know she made a full recovery and the guy went to prison. We found a body washed up in the rocks on the beach. I was taking photos of vultures because they were sitting on the rocks and they were pretty large. I first saw his distended stomach and followed it down to his foot. I grabbed my husband and said, "That's a body. Is that a body? Oh my gosh, that's a body." After double-checking, we walked away to call 911. Checking a third time from a different angle, I saw some of his skull missing and the unmistakable human hand. Somehow, we were able to get cell service long enough to tell the 911 dispatcher which state park we were in. Ambulance, firefighters, state police, a Coast Guard helicopter, truck, and boat all showed up. It was amazing to watch. They carried him up in a body bag, placed him on the asphalt, and left him there for 30 minutes. It was just another day to first responders. Oddly, we are thankful to have found him because he was on part of the beach no one ever crosses the river to get to. The tide was coming in when he was pulled out. Had we not found him when we found him, the crabs and vultures would have finished him off. His family would have never had answers. I don't know his name or anything other than what we witnessed. We are fine. Our trauma of finding a body is nothing compared to what his family would have endured, never knowing what happened to him. Found 4, all at once. Well, actually, the 4th body had been jammed so far under the front passenger seat that I didn't see it. Wear your seat belts, people. Not me, but my dad did. He was fishing and found a guy floating in the Kentucky River. He at first thought it was a dead cow until he paddled closer. The man was badly decomposed and bloated. Our local small-town sheriff's department used my dad's boat to transport the body. My dad had trouble sleeping for a while afterwards and sold the boat a few weeks later. My grandpa found a body decades earlier in the same area, and my uncle did too. It's believed the guy my dad found accidentally fell in while high on meth. I was a volunteer with the fire brigade in my former life. We responded to a car accident on a notorious bend a little out of town. People tend to take this particular S-bend way too fast. It's a 100 zone. But cars can't take such tight swerving bends at that speed and not end up a broken mess. So we arrive as the first responders on the scene. Being volunteers, we generally get to events prior to police and ambos. There's a car that had almost made it around the first bend, but lost control, careered across the opposite side of the road, rolled, went through a fence, and ended up wrapped around a tree near the second bend 200 meters away. The driver had nearly been decapitated and the front passenger had become part of the car. There was a children's car seat about halfway between both bends that had been ejected from the car likely as it rolled. 4 of us were sent to see if there was anyone injured around. I found the toddler in the paddock dead. I quit not long after that. Don't speed. Buckle your kids up properly. I didn't exactly find a body, but I had a neighbor in my apartment building jump. I didn't know what happened at first, as I just saw a man lying on the sidewalk and I couldn't see much from my first floor apartment. I worked in human services with homeless folks and saw that he wasn't wearing shoes, so my first thought was that he was intoxicated and he either fell or passed out. I ran outside worried that he was overdosing. As soon as I ran out the front door, I saw that on the other side of his head was a massive pool of blood, and I realized what happened. He was gasping for air with wide open eyes when I got to him. His pulse was weak. My girlfriend was already calling 911, so I tried to gauge responsiveness and keep him conscious, but the entire time he felt cold. I remember thinking that his skin felt like rubber. Someone else came outside and did CPR when we couldn't find a pulse anymore. He was dead by the time EMTs arrived. All of that really haunted me, but what bothered me most was that for weeks after, I would often hear women in the apartment gossiping about it and talking about how they watched it all happen from their balconies. The thought that so many people watched him jump and didn't even try to help bothers me more than anything else. Saw a contractor at work get smoked by an electrical arc from switchgear connected directly to the power company. He was wiping sweat from his eyes when the switchgear arced. His left foot was still in his boot, but that was about all that was left. Last year I did. I live in the outskirts of a city where it's mostly street parking in the neighborhoods. I park in the garage in the back alley, so I hardly ever go out the front. One day, my girlfriend came over and she parks in the street directly out front of my house. She comes in and mentions to me that there is a gold Jeep that has been parked in front of my house for at least a week in the same spot. It smells like bad beer when I walk past it, she told me. Immediately, there are bells going off in my head. I tell her what I think it is and that I'm going to go check it out. She jokingly replied something like, maybe you'll find a dead person. Well, I had the worst feeling walking down the stairs and out to that car. I got outside and noticed something dripping out of the back seat into the gutter. I catch the smell. Oh my god, I thought. This Jeep had tinted windows, so I go up to it and look through the front passenger window with my hands cupped, thinking someone maybe OD'd or took their own life in there. I didn't see anything up front. I walked around to the rear and looked to see if it was an animal or something in the trunk. Still nothing. Then I walked around to the driver's side and looked in the back. I saw the guy lying hunched over to the side in the back seat, but not naturally. The guy had a bag zip-tied over his head and his hands zip-tied behind his back. I register what I'm seeing and jump back in shock and call the cops. I waited outside where the fire department showed up first. As I watched them break in, some of the younger ones start heaving. Well, turns out his bodily fluids were pooled up in the backseat, and that's what I saw dripping out. Cops closed off the block for the whole evening, and I got drunk. I don't recommend that to anyone. They never did solve the homicide. I still have anxious feelings sometimes that I'm going to happen upon a body. Also, I won't ever forget that smell. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a like and comment down below if you have any suggestions for the next videos. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well for more videos like this one. See you!